But I feel like if it's going to be a tower defense, and that's the part that has a fail state, if the farming doesn't have a fail state, then that should be the part that's the main focus.
Right.
So, tower defense first, farming second, but the farming can enhance your tower defense, for instance, or encourage it in different ways.
There are some choices that you would be able to make in a tabletop game that you can't really translate to video games. There has to be a finite number of choices that you go into. There has to be a finite number of characters that you interact with. There is a bit of limitation to the character itself. The thing about gaming is that I don't equate it to work. And I think that while sometimes when you're doing a game, and I know this from experience, sometimes when you're running a game, it can feel like work, but at the end of the day, the overall experience is not supposed to feel like work. Alex, one of these things is not like the other. It's either me or you. Which is the thing that's not like the other?
Whatever your background happens to be today, probably.
You're right. It's not a typical background. Cut to me. There, the background's changed now. Ooh.
There you go.
That was a fun
three
gag.
screaming possums don't really do it for me.
Oh, damn it. Okay, how about now?
Better.
Great, good. That's going to be fun for me to edit. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex.
And on the show today, we have wonderful, got your peanut butter in my chocolate, no, your chocolate in my peanut butter kind of episode. So,
oh, good.
Yes, but more like putting your salmon into Shirley Temple. It's not as good as you might think. Don't do that, by the way.
And if you do that, let us know how terrible it was, I guess.
Make sure to take a picture for the gram. I wanted to talk about a certain game that I played recently, and the reason why I want to talk about it is because we need to have a conversation about genres that don't go together. Recently on the show, I had talked a little bit about the idea of doing like Stardew Valley, but with Dark Souls. Remember when we started to make like almost the necromancer farming kind of game kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Neat concept that no one's ever going to do, but...
Star Souls, right.
Star Souls, right. I played a game recently that made me think that they were going to do this interesting genre crossover. And it was called Midnight Acres. Midnight Acres, I believe, is in early access right now. It just recently released. And the concept is that you run a farm. And so you do all of the kind of farmy stuff that you're normally used to, where you grow your garden and chop down trees and, mine for ores and stuff, and then you can build things. Do your trading and do your building of your fences and all of that good stuff, water and fertilize, all that. And that's what you do during the day. But there's
your day job, yeah.
That's your day job. There's a day-night cycle. And as night comes in, all these monsters come to try and raid your farm and get your magical little glowy seed that you have in the one specific plot on your land. So it's sort of like the magic crystal that you have to defend. And so they'll come and you have to figure out how to defend against it. And you can build turrets and stuff that you can use to defend and...
As a farmer does.
As a farmer does, you build turrets all over the place. Turrets, fences that they can't get around, all sorts of interesting things. And as the nights progress, you get more dangerous monsters and larger swarms of monsters that come to your farm to try and take it over. And... so, at first I thought, oh, well, this is kind of an interesting idea, right? Because you have the farming aspect, but then it's also like a dangerous world where all of this stuff is coming out of the woodwork.
I think I was saying before, it sounds like a farming game by day and a tower defense game by night, almost.
Yes, it is. And the thing is that that sounds like a really good idea until you play it.
I don't think it even sounds like a good idea. Tower defense games bore the shit out of me.
Well, I guess that what my thinking of it was is that it would be like more of a combat fantasy kind of game, but with farming elements, almost like a more structured day-night cycle that you would have in, let's say, like a Rune Factory.
Yeah.
Or, and I guess this is really what I was thinking. I was thinking of Dying Light. Because, like, in Dying Light, you have a very different game during the daytime hours and the nighttime hours, right? You have your basic zombies where you're kind of fighting off the zombies during the day, and then, like, those super uber zombies come out at night because they can't be around the sun. And then it goes from being the hunter to the hunted, So that kind of interesting dichotomy I really liked, and I thought that's what it was going to kind of be. You build up, and then you have to see if what you built actually works. Anyway, long story short, I refunded this game. It is rare that happens, but I did it for this, because after about an hour of trying to figure out how I would make this game fun, I just stopped trying. They give you the resources to, like, start growing everything, and it's in real time. It's not done by day after day after day. All your plants grow on little timers, essentially. So I'm sitting there, and I'm growing my garden, and I have, like, a handful of tomato seeds, and I'm planting the tomato seeds, and you gotta fertilize them. Okay, I gotta make some fertilizer, I gotta go chop down some trees, get some fertilizer together, and I'm doing all of my regular, farmy game stuff. I fertilize, I can water them, and I'm waiting for them to grow. But by the time I do all of that, all of a sudden, it's nighttime, and the slimes are coming at me, and then the piranha plants are coming at me, and the spiders are coming at me. By the way, there's 3 different kinds of enemies that they load you down with on night 1. That's a pretty big learning curve. You have 3 different kinds of enemies that attack you on night 1. And before you know it, the first thing they want to do is destroy all your plants. They go after your plants. So I'm trying to grow my tomato seeds, and then they destroyed like half the tomatoes. And I don't have, like, a weapon by this point, and I haven't been able to afford turrets because I needed stone, and I had not been provided with an axe by that point.
Which you totally used to chop stone.
Or a pickaxe, sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's the kind of axe I meant. Pretend I put
stone.
pick in front of that axe. That's what it was. Anyway, I had an axe for the wood, but I didn't have a pickaxe for the stone. So now I'm like, I just have my axe in my hand, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just use the axe to try and hit these guys. But, I died, and after I died, they basically say, okay, well, you can restart the day, but I'm on day 1. So it starts me back at the beginning of the game again. So now I'm gotta do the day over and try this again. And then the second time, I didn't die, but the monsters ransacked my gem and destroyed that, and that also ends the day. So back to the start I go again. So, third attempt at day 1, I start thinking, okay, so basically, this isn't a farming game. This is a tower defense game, like you thought it was. So, I have to play it like that. This is no longer a common relaxing experience like the game had actually suggested, like, hey, chill farming elements. No, this is not a chill farming game. This is a tower defense game now, because these two things don't really work well together.
Did it tutorialize you at all about the night aspect of the game?
Oh, I knew that the night aspect was going to be part of it. That they
Sure,
were
no,
going to
I mean,
attack.
did the game, in-game, teach you anything about that?
Just that there are monsters that are going to come to your farm, and you need to be able to defend against it.
Okay, did it give you any resources to do that?
They gave me a workbench and the workbench had some schematics on it, like to build turrets and stuff. But in order to build turrets, I needed stone, and I didn't have a pickaxe. And I didn't know how to make a pickaxe.
Okay, so they gave you the tools to do the thing, but not the tool to get the stuff to do the thing.
Correct.
So it sounds like they have an issue of pacing.
Yes, because I would not have, first of all, expected there to be 3 different kinds of monsters you meet on night 1. I would think that they'd start with just, like, one kind of basic monster, like the little blobby things come at you. And also, not to the number that they do, because it's really like waves of these monsters coming at you even on night 1. From all directions. So from like the front and the back and everything. So as you're going off and saying, "Ooh, there's some blobby guys over here," and I start smacking them, before you know it, they're attacking your farm because the blobby guys from the other side came in. But yeah, no, 3 different kinds of monsters. It's just way too ramped up right up at the front.
Yeah, it sounds like they shouldn't be in early access as much as they should be in, hey, we're still beta testing this. Give us your feedback.
Right. I would have thought that night 1 should be your layup. You know, usually in most games, night 1 is your tutorial layup to make sure that you can, you know, here's how you're going to defend yourself against this night 1, and then kind of like off to the races. It's very hands-off in that way. Maybe because they wanted people to feel like it was a bigger exploration thing, because I know there are mines that you can go into eventually, and so you can explore the world a little bit more, and you know, go into dungeons and stuff, even though you have the farm. But like, obviously there's work that they need to do on the game in order for it to be playable beyond night 1, because I did, on 3rd attempt, I did eventually get in gear, and I did get through night 1, but then I was like, oh, this is the rest of the game, isn't it? And I was like, I don't want to play the rest of this game, because I now don't care about how the structure goes. But the bigger problem, and the thing I really wanted to talk about, was that I realized that these are 2 different genres that just do not work well together, because they're being played for very different reasons. When people play a tower defense game, you're playing a tactical game.
Yeah.
Farming games, life sims, are not supposed to be that kind of a tactical experience. They're very chill in that regard. I can make my farm and I can build up my farm, but I'm not really that worried about my farm failing or getting ransacked. It's not as much fun if every time I build stuff, some slime comes along and starts destroying it. There's a reason why I never in Stardew Valley built the slime farms or engaged with the things where you can actually have slimes come to your farm at night, because the slimes will just destroy stuff.
Yeah.
Why you build scarecrows all the time to keep the crows from eating your seeds, you know?
Yeah, I feel like scarecrows in this game should do something to scare monsters. I don't know, demoralize them.
That would be great, yeah, and maybe they do.
It feels like it should be a tower defense game first,
and
then a farming game second, so that instead of like having the farming aspect be the first thing you learn, maybe you have the first thing you learn be the tower defense. And maybe instead of being a chill farming experience, you make it a tactical farming experience.
You could arrange it almost like it was Plants vs. Zombies, you know?
Not even like that. Maybe you could grow vines, and the vines help to entangle monsters.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like if it's going to be a tower defense, and that's the part that has a fail state, if the farming doesn't have a fail state, then that should be the part that's the main focus.
Right.
So, tower defense first, farming second, but the farming can enhance your tower defense, for instance, or encourage it in different ways.
Right.
So, you go, I'm going to grow a corn maze over here, you know? I'm going to grow a bunch of corn to make it so their vision is obscured, or they have to go slower, or maybe I grow vines, or maybe I grow these poisonous plants over here. or they're not
Right.
poisonous to people to eat, but they're poisonous to these monsters.
Yeah.
Because then you're going, okay, well, it's really a tower defense game, and there's this ancillary part that is farming, where you can reap the benefits of either maybe plants get, I don't know, are the plants used to just make you money?
The plants are used mostly so that you can grow fruit and vegetables, and I think that those are used eventually in cooking recipes or something to that, and you probably sell them. You also get money by defeating the monsters. So you could have just made the one money thing be the monsters, as a concept. But I like what you're talking about, the idea that the actual farming aspect is the tower defense aspect, essentially.
I don't feel like having them separate does it any service.
It is strange, because the only interaction that they really have is that the enemies want to destroy your farm. So you're building the farm, because the monsters want to destroy it, then you have to do this other thing, which is to build up all the defenses and everything to keep your farm safe. But
I would almost say just try to not even, ignore the farming aspect at that point and just build tower defense.
Yeah, you know what? That might be an interesting thing to try. If anyone out there actually does have Midnight Acres, and you've had an experience with it, try just ignoring the farming aspect and see if it works out okay. Because it seems like it's just a bigger problem. I have to put a bunch of resources into getting some tomatoes, but I also have to put a ton of resources into keeping the tomatoes safe from the hordes of monsters.
You could just, you said you had, one glowing seed that can't die?
There's one glowing seed that has to be protected above all else.
So you just put fences around it?
Yeah, and you learn how to do fences. So, you just go and chop down as many trees as you can and start putting down fences all over the place with the wood that you get, and do that. Maybe that...
And then turrets. And just do that, and just earn all your money through killing monsters, and just go chop wood instead of farming.
But that's going to undermine the whole idea that you even had a farming game in the first place. So that's kind of the point.
I'm just wondering if that would work, because...
Oh, yeah.
If they're so far divorced that the farming is just going to get destroyed, then I don't see a reason to not try that if that's a thing.
Sure, yeah. Or if I could just keep the seed on me at that point, it's like, I'm just going to put it in my backpack and then I'm going to go traveling.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. If I could move it around, that'd be cool. Put it in the barn.
It sounds weird to have them, two genres that sound like they might go together but don't because of the way they did it. I think someone else could probably put those two genres together.
Sure.
And make them work. Again, if it were a tactical farming game.
Mm-hmm.
Not Plants vs. Zombie, but you have to tactically think out and plan what you're doing. That might be more interesting than what you're telling me about this game.
Right. I think it has everything to do, just in a larger sense, about what kind of experience that you want to get out of a game. And if you're trying to take two different things that lend themselves to a different kind of playing style, you're going to have a lot of things to overcome, which is how do you synergize them in a way that's going to make sense. Me building a farm is a very different experience than me trying to defend a tower. Even things like a shooting game and then an RPG, those can be tricky if they're kind of divorced from each other. Because some people will play the RPGs for the story and the character development, but it's hard to do that if you're also trying to focus on a Twitch shooter. Those things can be very difficult to rectify. Not entirely impossible, but...
You gotta do Time Crisis.
Yeah, do Time Crisis, exactly.
Do a Twitch shooter, but you can't shoot the hostages.
You can't shoot the hostages, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there are some things that just are not going to go together very well. You can't really do something like a Final Fantasy, and at the same time try to do a Rainbow Six. It's not going to make a lot of sense to try and put some of these things together, no matter how much you might like them. Because I might like playing this kind of game and this kind of game, but together, it gets tricky. It is exactly that. Sometimes you can put the peanut butter and the chocolate together and you get the peanut butter cup. But sometimes you think to yourself, ooh, I really like tuna fish, and I really like ice cream, but when you put the two of them together, it will not work. It will not work. No. Tuna fish ice cream does sound kind of Should we try that? The tuna fish ice cream genre. What are some of the worst things that we could put together for genres?
What about a horror cozy game?
Yeah, like an
jump scare cozy game.
Yeah, a jump scare. Oh my god. Can you imagine you have to do like it's PT, but you're going around the house trying to repair different like furniture that's in the house while PT is happening.
No, I think I've seen a game that does something similar. It's not PT itself, but it's like haunted house renovator or something.
See, this also sounds like a very bad idea. This sounds like a recipe for
sounded
disaster.
ridiculous. Like, I think it was multiplayer, so it's almost like a Phasmophobia ghost hunting, but you've got to get rid of that ghost and like clean the house up so you can renovate it. And I was like, what an odd mix.
Yes,
because I'm a fan of like House Flipper.
Yeah.
I am waiting with bated breath for December 14th when House Flipper 2 comes out, because it's multiplayer. And Crave and I both like to play it, so we're probably going to play it together. It's just a very relaxing game, It's cool, I can decorate and do all this stuff. So throwing in some horror elements or spooky elements like that is a little interesting at one point, but also like, what the fuck at the other point.
Sure. Okay. Ooh, what about Power Wash Simulator and Roller Coaster Tycoon?
I would love to pressure wash a fucking roller coaster.
Yeah, but see, you have to build the roller coaster theme park, and then you have to keep power washing it while the park is in service.
I don't think that sounds like it wouldn't work. I think it sounds like people would just metagame the shit out of it and just build easy parks to clean.
Yeah, I think that there are just some, like Skyrim and Halo. Like, I like Halo, and I like Skyrim, but I would not normally think of trying to do, like, a tactical shooter in the world of Skyrim. Although, as I say that, it would make dealing with dragons a lot easier, but I think it kind of undermines the very concept of being the world that it is. How dangerous it was.
If you have any ideas of games that do mixed genre poorly, or other ideas for genres that you think would go together poorly, or any games you've played that just kind of are like, what? Maybe it's like Midnight Acres and it doesn't really work because the two genres really just don't mesh. You should let us know.
Yeah.
That's you, Clayton Calix.
That's right. Alex, as you're probably aware, I am a fan of the Borderlands series.
Yeah, just a little bit of a fan. I think your personality is a little bit of a claptrap.
Yeah, damn you. No. Talking about two genres that you didn't think would go together, shooters and RPGs, actually, this has a little bit of a mild enough RPG elements that go with the shooting elements.
I mean, RPGs and shooters go together all the time. At least RPG elements. Right. That gets into the nitty-gritty of what you consider an RPG. Does it have to have RPG elements, or do you actually have to have role-playing and choices to make it an RPG?
Right.
I'm not the person to ask about this. I don't care.
The most recent release in the Borderlands series is actually not called Borderlands, but it was Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Yes.
Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was a game that came out last year, and it was based off of probably one of the most successful DLCs that the series has ever had, which was Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep that they did for Borderlands 2. And if you don't know what that is, it was basically that Tiny Tina decided to lead the Vault Hunters through a game of bunkers and badasses, which is their version of Dungeons and Dragons, talking about all of the different tropes they're in as you try to defeat the Handsome Sorcerer, which is basically her analog for Handsome Jack in that game. Wonderlands goes back to bunkers and badasses as a full-scale game, where you lead these new characters on a little bit of a mission to defeat the Dragon Lord. And your character, though, this time gets to be a fresh creation that you get to make yourself. You are not playing a predetermined character like you do in previous Borderlands games, and you get to pick
It's still
a class.
just the newbie. You just pick the flavor of newbie.
Yeah, you get to customize what you look like and what you sound like and everything, and choose from one of 4 or 5 different character classes, I want to say. Down the road, you even get to multi-class, and you get to choose a second class to mix and match if you would like.
I chose the Spore Warden.
Oh, me too. Spore Wardens are great because you get your little, you get your happy little mushroom friend.
Yeah,
he's cool.
I had just gotten that.
Yeah, and that's pretty great because you have played a little bit of this game yourself.
Yes.
Yes, I have played through to the end, and what I wanted to talk about now, in this regard, is Wonderlands takes the idea of tabletop gaming, and it applies it to a video game.
Yes.
And this is something that's not necessarily new. I've seen some various kinds of adaptations or referencing of tabletop gaming in video gaming
just before.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, obviously, there's more direct adaptations of tabletop gaming, like the Baldur's Gate series, which is directly revolving around Dungeons and Dragons. This is more of a meta sort of a view of that world. Even in Life is Strange, Before the Storm, actually, Chloe is periodically throughout those chapters playing a game of like Dungeons and Dragons or something similar to it. And you make some character choices about what she's going to do with her character in the game, and they're sitting down at an actual like role-playing station playing the game. So that's kind of a little bit meta. But the adaptation of tabletop gaming to video gaming is a very interesting one. But more than that, what Wonderlands does is talk about the act of being a tabletop game as a theme for the game itself. Yeah, like it's actually the point of the game, to explore tabletop as a game. And I guess my question is, you played a little bit of it. Do you think that the way that it does like the overworld and the class system is a good representation of how tabletop gaming works?
I mean, that's broad, so no, generally, because like there's a lot of different tabletop games.
Mm-hmm.
So if we mean like specifically like D&D, RPGs like that, it's the perception of what I think people think tabletop gaming is like.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes, for instance, what your actual game may be like. If you use miniatures and whatever. But I think it's more like the perception of this is what tabletop gaming is like. You have these things, it's over the top, it's very meta commentary, it's ridiculous with your group.
Right.
But I don't think a good representation of like, this is tabletop. It's like, this is like a stereotypical tabletop group. I'm casting magic missile at the darkness. Bring me some more Mountain Dew.
Right. It's like the South Park episode where they're playing World of Warcraft. This is the interpretation of what you do in the game, more than the game itself, right?
Yeah, a little bit,
Yeah. Because there's a lot of examples of the video games being a direct adaptation of tabletop gaming. We've played
especially
many of them.
Especially if you have anything that's D&D based, which is your Baldur's Gate, your Neverwinter Nights, your all those ones, those CRPGs for days.
Yeah.
Or Pathfinder or Vampire the Masquerade.
I was going to say Bloodlines is directly based off of that system of Vampire. Or Warhammer, for that matter.
Yep.
Which is based off of the tactical game. So you can adapt the system. I think that there's been some pretty successful ways to adapt the system, but the flavor of actually playing the game in more of a meta context is, I think, what Wonderlands is trying to achieve more than anything. Yeah,
because I can play a Warhammer 40k game. There's so many of them on Steam. I can play tactic games. I can play ARPGs. I can play third-person hack and slash shooters. I can play RTS games or RTS RPGs in Warhammer 40K on PC.
Sure.
But they are not there. There's like one or two that are like the tabletop itself, but like in virtual form. But aside from those, they're just kind of like games in the setting that are different games based on what they want to do.
Right. The end of all of this is pretty much that Wonderlands still plays like the first-person shooter that former Borderlands games were.
Right. It doesn't even give up the guns. They just flavor them slightly different.
Yes, you have the aesthetic of the guns being different. So instead of just pistols, I have the little hand crossbows, essentially.
Yeah.
The shotguns are the elemental weapons that you sprinkle the magic dust into and you shoot them.
And then I like that you get a melee weapon. I just don't like that it's not really a primary thing. It's not.
No.
Can I exchange my gun for a melee weapon? No. The melee weapon's kind of an afterthought if enemies are close to you.
Right.
I had to rebind my melee weapon because it was like V on the keyboard, and I rebound it to my middle mouse button because I'm like, I don't want to have to melee.
Start creep your fingers over in order to do a melee attack.
I found that if I rebound to the middle mouse button, I'm already using this to shoot, so I just kind of go like that and can melee enemies several times in a row without swapping my keys to move.
Right. Yeah.
So.
The thing I liked the most about it, though, is the idea of doing like a different interpretation of some like classic fairy tales and fantasy, tales. That's what a lot of the sub-missions are all about, like sub-quests. The point at the end, which I won't spoil for you, but the story at the end, too, is also a little bit more about the relationship between the players and their characters. And how those two things kind of interact, and when characters become more than just something that you're playing and really a part of you, is like where the message of the whole game eventually goes for Tina and
friends you made
Lord.
Along the way.
Right, well, because the Dragon Lord and Tina have a more direct relationship than you get from the very beginning of the game. As far as like meta commentary on tabletop gaming, it does an okay job, but it's not really a representation, like an adaptation so much of the genre. Now, that being said, since at the beginning of this I did say that we were going to talk a little bit about adaptation of tabletop to video games, I also have a little bit of a qualm with how some of those tabletop games do get adapted when it comes to video games, because you have some limitations. There's some benefits and there's some real problems with it. There are some choices that you would be able to make in a tabletop game that you can't really translate to video games. There has to be a finite number of choices that you go into. There has to be a finite number of characters that you interact with. There is a bit of limitation to the character itself, but the benefit then comes in having more definitive math, like in terms of like this bolt goes from here to here and does this much damage, and we know where your line of sight is because you're looking at it right now in this world, and the benefit of actually seeing your characters and seeing the game world and not having to visualize it in your mind.
Right.
I've had conversations, though, where there are people that were disappointed by several video game RPGs because the choice that they really wanted to make was not an option, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't an option.
That's hard to account for too, because you want to give a certain experience. So
sure,
if you say we're to give them 20 different choices, I mean, you can't do that for every single thing in the game, because it just becomes bloated.
Right.
And so you kind of whittle it down to several choices at that point. But, even then, everything you're doing has several different outcomes.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't remember the number, but Baldur's Gate technically has several, like, I think it's several 100,000 different endings.
But I imagine that those are if you categorize each choice and how they interact with the different choices. Right.
I assume so.
Yeah.
But, like, it's already got this many different things you can do, and it's not a small game, but, like, there's only several choices you can make with each NPC for different things. Unless you also then just decide to kill the NPC outside because whatever, which I believe you can do.
Right.
Like, overcoming obstacles, I had one, for instance, with me, I had to get rid of this floating eye scrying thing. And I was like, alright, what's the best way I can deal with this? I have to do it stealthily. It's resistant to a lot of damage. It doesn't have a lot of hit points, though. And so I was like, what I opted to do was to sneak and then pick it up and then throw it into a chasm full of lava.
A chasm, huh?
Yeah, chasm full of lava.
There you go.
Chasm.
No, it's fine.
I say it that way on purpose.
I'm gonna name my next RPG character Chasm.
Good. So yeah, like overcoming its damage resistance because I used falling damage. So I went yeet down the hole.
Yeah.
And dead. And nobody noticed it. So I was like, could have just combated it. Probably could have done some magic. I don't know. But yeeting it down a fucking cliff works.
That wouldn't work in a Star Wars RPG, though.
Yeah. Well, it's because
no one dies from falling.
Yeah, that's why Darth Maul came back in the Clone Wars.
That's why Palpatine didn't die after falling into a reactor. There are some limitations to what video games can do. I just think that the reason why we have a tendency to play those more than tabletop gaming is because you kind of need a group in order to do the tabletop gaming.
They're more accessible.
Right, and a lot of the math is in front of you. Like, yeah. I think I've talked about that before, is that when you're playing a tabletop game, you're figuring out a lot of the math of the actual tactical aspects of rolling and what your character can do, etc. And in a video game, most of that is kind of behind the scenes, usually where you don't have to specifically look at it all the time, and you kind of just go into combat and fight, and the math is kind of done behind the scenes for you, all the rolling and everything like that. That's even true in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, because that's how they figure out, like, criticals and stuff like that. So you're firing a mile a minute, and then all of a sudden it's like critical, because you've hit your critical threshold. Which I think was an interesting change, because they used to have just, like, critical areas on enemies in previous Borderlands games, where you just, if you hit there, you're getting critical hits. And in this one, you actually get a critical chance to hits. So they did change that to make it a little bit more in line with the tabletop experience. But
well, I think the other thing too with why RPGs are a lot easier to get into with like video games is because you can get tutorialized in a video game much quicker than learning an RPG like tabletop version.
That's true. You have to kind of learn the whole system of an RPG. A tabletop
you don't
RPG.
have to, but I feel like it's harder to teach players in increments with that. Because it's like, yeah, with tabletop. Because if you were to do incremental, it's like, cool. Well, first thing you need to learn is how to make your character, and you need to learn all of that.
Sure. Unless
you get someone a pre-made. But then it's like, all right, you have to like give people the scenario and tell them what they need to do.
Sure.
Or like ask them what they want to do. It's like, all right, you need to roll perception, so roll your d20, add that check there, and do this. And that's how you do the skill checks. And then attacking is this, and it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot
to learn for some people.
Yeah.
But a video game hides a lot of those things so that it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all the graphics up at the front where you're like, oh, here's my character, and here's how I move, and now I move, and here's how you hit the enemy. And you just go through that process, and it's a lot easier to digest right up at the front. And before you know it, you've actually understood the entire system, but you've been led into it very slowly over the course of time. Yeah. It's not the easiest thing in the world to adapt tabletop well to video games, and you have to understand that those are two very different genres. I do have to play Baldur's Gate 3 because I did hear that there was a very good representation of that. Even though you can't necessarily do everything in the game, They do give you a lot of player choices. Yeah, you have a lot of choices. They do. You have a lot of choices. I guess my question that I would ask everybody else out there is, what games do you think did a good job of adapting a tabletop system to a video game? And if you have those, please let us know what they are. Maybe so that I can play them myself. I have had occasion to play a video game version of a tabletop system, just so that I can see if I like the tabletop system.
There you go. That's how you get into Gloomhaven.
I tried Gloomhaven. I did not like Gloomhaven, so...
The video game or tabletop game?
The video game. I didn't like the tactical room by room progression in Gloomhaven. It felt too dungeon
it saves you
crawly.
money because the tabletop version is expensive.
Great. Anyway, let us know in the comments down below. Alex, I ran across an article a little while ago.
Why did you run an article over?
Because it needed to be taught a lesson. No.
Perfect. Fair enough.
This is kind of a weird one. And I don't want to go over the whole thing because there's like 13 things in this. And I don't really want to go over them point by point. But I ran across this article that was based on another article. Let me see if I can explain. So, back in 2013, we're going way back, Forbes did an article that got pretty popular, apparently, called Mentally Strong People, the 13 Things They Avoid, written by Cheryl Connor, who is now a former contributor. She's a licensed clinical social worker and a writer, and she put these 13 things together of stuff that you should avoid if you are going to be mentally strong. Now, on its face, that has absolutely nothing to do with gaming. Except that then, Role-Playing Tips saw that and modified it to Mentally Strong GMs and 13 Things They Avoid. And so, what I wanted to do is just give you, like, the first two examples to compare and contrast to see if this even makes sense as an adaptation in its own regard. So,
sure.
So I'll do number one, the first point, and I'll read you from the Forbes article, and then I will read you the version that they had for role-playing tips. So,
sure.
So number one in Forbes was waste time feeling sorry for themselves. Okay, so you don't see mentally strong people feeling sorry for their circumstances or dwelling on the way they've been mistreated. They have learned to take responsibility for their actions and outcomes, and they have an inherent understanding of the fact that frequently life is not fair. They are able to emerge from trying circumstances with self-awareness and gratitude for the lessons learned. When a situation turns out badly, they respond with phrases such as, "oh well," or perhaps simply, "next." I don't know if I know a lot of mentally strong people, come to think of it now that I'm...
You don't know many CEOs, do you?
Do you think CEOs do that? I don't know. I don't see a lot of CEOs that say, "oh well," or "next." I see a lot of them that need to tweet relentlessly about everybody. But anyway, so the role-playing tips version of this is wasting time feeling sorry for ourselves. Mentally strong GMs don't get stuck in the mud feeling bad about a bad game session or something that went wrong at the table. I don't think they know many GMs. Anyway, everyone has an off night. Successful GMs take responsibility for what we do wrong, or didn't do as well as we could have. We then take steps to prevent it from happening again. We learn from our mistakes and reach for those dice. Okay, does this make sense as something to adapt from...
It's a little weird.
Yeah. That's what I was getting.
Let's just rewrite this thing. They wrote this. Let's rewrite it about games instead, though.
Right.
I feel like it's trying to be like motivational.
I guess so. I guess my one big problem is, first of all, I do have a little bit of like an iffy quality about the even original Forbes article. Like if these tips, like I suppose that if you're just looking at people that are mentally strong or are able to, you know, deal with circumstances and have the emotional quotient necessary to handle different kinds of situations, these are probably things that you wouldn't want to fall into. But
this is for CEOs, right?
I think it's for CEOs,
or whatever the article's about.
Well,
aren't a lot of like CEOs actually like psychopaths?
Yes, that was what American Psycho was all about. Did you not know that?
Yeah, no,
Patrick
no.
Bateman
I mean, like
was...
they.
Oh yes,
not
no,
like
I know what you're talking
psychopath, but like psychopathic.
Yes, I think they've done.
Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Maybe, yeah. It's the Patrick Bateman who they all idolize, I think.
Maybe.
The title of this article, for going back to the Forbes, is, they start out by saying, in the introduction, for all the time executives spend concerned about physical strength and health, when it comes down to it, mental strength can mean even more. Particularly for entrepreneurs, numerous articles talk about critical characteristics of mental strength: tenacity, grit, optimism, and an unfailing ability, as Forbes contributor David Williams says, to fail up. So, yeah, this is targeted specifically to executives, and they're kind of trying to modify it so that the GMs are the essentially executive that is running not the company, but the game, and how that translates.
I don't know, I feel like a lot of executives like that are some kind of sociopath or something.
Well, see, they needed to read...
It's been a while.
They needed to read... Listen, they needed to read these articles to understand how to be mentally strong, Alex. The second one, though, I think is prescient here, which is give away their power. Mentally strong people avoid giving others the power to make them feel inferior or bad. They understand they are in control of their actions and emotions. They know their strength is in their ability to manage the way they respond. Now, the...
sociopaths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one of those, it's like, control freak. Okay. The role-playing tips version of this is giving away our power. This one has to do with interacting with others, namely our players. Sometimes tempers flare. Some players can be pushy or quote rules at you like they are song lyrics to try and prove you wrong. Sometimes we are wrong. If that's the case, see number 1 above. Admit it, fix it, and move on. But sometimes we're right. And it's not a case of right or wrong at all. A mentally strong GM does not give other people power to make us feel inferior or bad. We maintain control over our emotions and in the way we deal with players and conflict at the table. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't know if GMs maintaining control of their emotions makes that much sense in what is essentially a dramatic storytelling game. I think the emotions have to come into it. You can have some control over them, but the emotions are kind of important to the overall experience of the character development.
I mean, you're not the one playing a character typically as a GM, but
you're playing a lot of characters.
You're playing all the characters, not like one specifically. So, like, I feel like,
right?
I don't know. It's weird. I don't think you should be detached as a GM.
Right, and I wouldn't want you to be combative as a GM either.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, it's my word or nothing. Or
I've had GMs like that.
Yeah. Having the power to other people power to make them feel inferior or bad. It's like, well, yeah, but I guess I wonder why you're playing with those people if that's the case. Unless this is supposed to be for professional GMs, I don't really know. This seems to be just general tips that are accrued from this idea of mentally strong people. This goes on. There's 13 points, but we don't have to get into them. But I think the generally interesting thing for me is the idea that you could take what is ostensibly an article that's about trying to tell executives how to run a company and trying to apply it to GMs running a tabletop game.
Like, yeah, I feel like if I were to read the rest, I'd probably be like, this doesn't make sense. Or even if they did make a little sense from their adaptation, I'd be like, I don't understand why you're adapting this. You're running a game, you're not running a business. And
Right.
I think anyone who would run a game like they would run a business is not someone that I'd want to game with.
The thing about gaming is that I don't equate it to work. And I think that while sometimes when you're doing a game, and I know this from experience, sometimes when you're running a game, it can feel like work, but at the end of the day, the overall experience is not supposed to feel like work. And so applying these ideas as if they are useful in a tabletop setting, I don't think really works the same way. Maybe based on what kind of experience you're looking for. If you're doing a professional sort of game, if you're doing a live play, if you're a Critical Role or something, maybe this would make sense because it's kind of a business itself, or you're thinking of it as a business. But I think the reason why a lot of those live plays are successful is because they never feel like a business. They never feel like an executive board that's coming together to, make a product. It's not like that. It's still a game. It's still a storytelling experience. And that's a different set of skills. You have a creative part of your brain, you have the analytical part of your brain, and so while some things might be helpful for one, I don't really know if they necessarily make sense for the other. The only reason I can imagine they thought it would make sense to adapt this is because if we're talking about, like, emotional strength, that might have some crossover into, like, creativity, and so that might be something that you can adapt. But I start to wonder, like, I can't necessarily equate, like, filing with creating my character, or, like, figuring out my character backstory. These don't always work together. My world building experience of trying to create a wonderful, rich world for everybody doesn't necessarily work when I'm trying to figure out, like, did we do well this fiscal quarter? It's not the same, not exactly the same thing. Not that it's bad advice, but I don't know if it necessarily works well as a direct one-to-one correlation between the two.
Yeah, probably not.
It was such an odd thing for me to find, where I was just like, I don't know why they decided to change this or modify it to try
easy
and apply.
Content.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. It's something that got popular in the heat of the moment, and I guess we're capitalizing on it too 10 years later. But it was just really weird. I had run across the role-playing tips article first, and they said, yeah, it's based on this article. And I'm like, what do you mean it's based on this article? And it was from Forbes. And when I think about Forbes, I don't think about gaming advice. Like,
You just don't think about Forbes.
I certainly don't when I start thinking about tabletop gaming. And so the idea that you would equate it to, it's like reading something in Newsweek and thinking, oh, great, now I know how to, do world building. I'll link the articles if people want to read them and go through them and give me your impression, but I'm not really thinking that this is a great idea 10 years after the fact.
GMing landscape has probably changed in the last decade too, so.
That is true. Because you have to remember 2013, this is even before 5e. Let us know in the comments down below if you thought that, the rules that apply to an executive board, a successful company, should apply to role-playing. I don't necessarily think that, but you tell me that I'm wrong. I'm more than happy to have that conversation, because I'm just mostly, I have a giant question mark over my head about this idea. Thank you for coming along on this journey of dichotomies that we've gone on.
They're going to say, thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yep, thank you for coming to the TED Talk, and the Dead Talk. TED Talk and Todd Talk. Those two things. They don't go together. Todd's a weirdo. Anyway,
because he runs Bethesda.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Total Pebble Knockdown. Alex, if the folks out there wanted to find more content from us, where could they go?
You can go to totalpebbleknockdown.com.
And when you are there, check out our Patreon. You can get these episodes early, and you can also get additional bonus content that we put out every week. You can also find more episodes of Titanium Mine coming back shortly, and you can find creatures over on the website as well. When you are there, you can also check out our, whatever you call it, that social media thing. Oh, Twitch? What?
No, I said merch.
Merch. You can find merch on there. Yeah, we don't have Twitch anymore. We don't do that. We do a live episode, though, on YouTube on the first Saturday of the month. So check us out for that. And you can find us on every podcast app known to mankind, like and review when you are there. Find us on all social media networks that we care to be on. Which should be 0 eventually. I feel like
it's 0 now, but
I feel like it's pretty much 0 at this point that I actually care to be on. But if I'm there, I'm at Titanium.
And I'm at EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
So find us over there for all of your pebbling needs. But mostly just check us out on the podcast apps and over here on YouTube as well, if you want to check out the full episodes. So, Alex, it's time to leave. And
yes.
It is time to start getting ready for Turkey Day. It's almost that time.
Yeah. Gobble, gobble.
Gobble, gobble. Get your wassail and your cider, which are both drinks, I hear.
Great. I don't know what wassail is, and I don't want to know.
Wassail is...
Bye!
You put a whale in a... Okay, we'll just... in a sail. It's the Moby Dick drink.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Is it?
Cutting that off right there.